Welcome everybody to our EU SME Center webinar called the ABC to Handling Late Payments as a Foreign Business in China. Now, for those of you who are participating for the first time or seeing for the first time our webinar, let me say a couple of words about the EU SME Center. Now, the EU SME Center is a European Union funded project that kicked off in 2010 with 6 implementing partners. The China-Britain Business Council, CCI France Chine, Bencham, Eurochamp, the European Union Chamber of Commerce, and the Italian Chamber. Now, the goal of the EU SME Center is to help European SMEs enter and operate in the Chinese market. And we do that through a variety of services, including advice, trainings, reports, and advocacy. Now, the topic we are going to discuss today, late payments, is, I would say, of vital importance to those European SMEs either preparing to go to China or already operating in China. Late payments are, unfortunately, a fact of life everywhere, in China more so. Now, according to studies by different companies, in recent years there have been some improvements to the late payment situation in China. For instance, average payment terms increased to 70 days in 2017, and fewer people stated that they saw an increase in payment delays. However, a lot of both Chinese and European companies are still experiencing considerable issues on late payments. For instance, many companies report experienced payment delays exceeding 120 days, 26% in 2017, and 47% report experiencing ultra-long payment delays. SMEs, and more concretely foreign SMEs, are hit, I would say, the hardest by this issue, as they lack the resources and negotiation weight to address late payments either beforehand or after the issue. However, we are lucky to have today Mr. René Bernard, Business Development Senior Associate at Ecovis Beijing, who will help us understand how to prevent and address the issue of late payments. Welcome.
Yes, welcome also from my side. So I'm René. It's my pleasure here to be at the EU SME Center and to give this presentation today about late payments. So yeah, I've studied, as you can see here, Chinese law and Chinese studies also, and I'm from Ecovis in the client and key account function. I deal with topics like IIT law and recently also, as you might have heard, the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulations, and of course also like topics like late payment is also always a hot topic for us. So maybe just some few words about Ecovis. So we are a German-based global company, so we are active in more than 60 countries actually, and are active in tax and accounting advisory and services, and also in audit and legal services. Our target group are mainly SMEs, so it's really a pleasure today to work with the EU SME Center. So we are not so much targeting concern companies. We also work for them, but our main target group are really the SMEs. And we are in Beijing since 2012, have grown since that time to more than 50 employees, and also got recently prizes, as you can see here, from renowned German magazines. Yeah, so as I already mentioned, we are active in mainly 4 to 6 fields. So the 4 core services are accounting, tax, auditing, and legal services. We also do investment and management consulting. And as talked already about GDPR, we are also into data security audits. Our base in Europe, as you can see here on the map, but we are also quite active in Asia, especially in China. Yeah, due to our good work, we have received several reference letters also. So we are a trusted partner, for instance, of the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, from trusted partner for VDMA, so the German Engineering Federation, and also work with the German Center here in Beijing, for instance. Okay, so let's go into the topic. My lecture today is mainly split it into 3 parts. So the important part starts with the preparation phase in that sense. So when we talk about late payments, it is always, of course, important to prevent late payments. So I will touch on issues like qualification checks, contract design, and other topics for this phase. Then phase 2, I will talk about the implementation phase. So this is what you can see here in point 2 and 3. So this touches on topics then like contract management and also claim certificates, for instance, the statute of limitations, and then the concrete collection of ARs. The last point is then the post phase, so to say. So what can be done when there are too many late payments. So this is about mainly the negotiations, about the treatment of such late payments and the debtors, and also about topics like collecting companies. So the first point would be then the preparation phase. So what we always recommend as an advisory company is to check the other party's qualifications. So especially this means the contractual capacity. So is the company really in a good shape to sign a contract with me? So this question every company should ask itself. So this touches on the topic especially of civil capacity. So which means if the company we are planning to work with is in operation actually, or is it bankrupt, for instance, or has the license of this company is it no more active? Also, for instance, what is the scope of the business license? Is this company allowed to do what I plan to do with it regarding the business? Also important then is the nature of the transaction. So this means if the business I'm planning to do with this company is really is this really the target of the company, or is it maybe only a hidden target, maybe to wash some money, for instance? So is there a hidden target of this company? Then secondly, important is also then to investigate about the business reputation of the business partner, of the counterparty. So there are several tools, like for instance the National Enterprise Credit Information Publicity System, or some registration information APP. So In Beijing, we have, for instance, the Beijing 企业查询, or another famous search system that recently appeared as a Tianyan Cha. So this is also quite famous to investigate about reputations of businesses. So you can investigate about the shareholder structure, also about if a company has administrative penalties going on, and so on. Then thirdly, you could also entrust, of course, a third party to investigate. Yeah, so for instance, about the shareholder structure and so on. So there are several credit information services. So for instance, one big company in this field comes from Alibaba, so Sesame Credit. Also Tencent, they have one company. And if securities are concerned, you can go to credit rating companies. So I mean, globally you have Standard & Poor's, for instance, and so on. Then the second important topic is to choose favorable payment terms, of course. So this means mainly that everyone should specify the specific payment time, the payment method, and the amount in the sales contract. So there's sometimes a problem with the acceptance terms, so this is a special point each one should pay attention to. So in Chinese it's called 验收条款. So if a company receives goods, for instance, then they normally check about the goods first, and this may influence the delay. So there should be clear regulations about this topic also in the contract. Then secondly, important is that you should always try to negotiate advance payments at best. Yeah. So we do this, for instance, mainly for B2C clients, and when your negotiation power is higher, then you can also, of course, negotiate a full amount of advance payment, or at least increase the amount of the down payment. Then important is then also for the collection later of the account receivables, that the understanding should not be that it's only with one, that the job is only with one department. So actually this topic of collection of ARs, so of account receivables, this is a job of the whole company. So you could include the marketing team, the production department, IT department, also HR department, for instance. Yeah, one topic also important for China is the LDP, so the LPD, so the Late Payment Directive of the European Union. So this is a directive issued by the EU concerning commercial late payments. So it was issued in 2013, and it applies to all the member states. Important is now for China that this LPD can also be applied to a WUFI if the company is a foreign company. So and this means so if the WUFI signs a contract with a business incorporated in any of the member states, then the WUFI may include the LPD in their contracts. Yeah, or select the law of the member states. And when the counterparty is a Chinese company, so then this means if the WUFI signs a contract with another Chinese company, the parties to the contract cannot select a governing law other than a Chinese law, other than the Chinese law. Then another important aspect is the Chinese law itself. So there is one clause, 114 in the Chinese contract law, so that states that the parties may agree on a certain amount of damages, so the liquidated damages or LDs, that is to be paid by the party which breaches the contract then. And so this is a Chinese regulation. So it's about the liquidated damages, so peichang in Chinese. And important is that such amount may be adjusted to a higher or lower amount. I will also talk about this later. And delays in making such a payment constitutes a breach to the LDs. And of course, then there you have interest, for instance. And in addition to the LDs, of course, the defaulting party is still obliged to make the payment itself, which is specified in the contract. So you have the normal payment plus the liquidated damages and also some interest, maybe. I will talk about this later. Then there's also one adjudication of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court's interpretation on the adjudication of contract disputes, so an interpretation. So if the parties did not agree on the LDs, according to Article 24 of the Supreme Court's interpretation on the adjudication of contract disputes, then a special regulation applies. So this means that the benchmark loan interest, which is published by the PBC, so the People's Bank of China, and also penalty interest of overdue loans can be used as a basis for the calculation of overdue interest. So this is just something like a hint to how companies can deal with it. And this penalty interest is between, so the interpretation states is between 30 to 50% of the benchmark loan interest. And also important is that compound interest, so interest on interest, does not apply. So here I've just given one example. So when we have an amount of overdue payment of 1 million RMB, then you have an overdue period of 120 days. Benchmark loan interest for 180 days during the overdue period would be 6%. Then according to the calculation, you can see you would have to pay overdue interest rate of 60,000 RMB. And also if the payer does not pay, then in the end, according to this judgment, then the interest is double the benchmark loan. So this is also stated in the Chinese law regulation. Another topic is, of course, to ask the payer to provide guarantees. Yeah, so in Chinese, this is called danbao. So the guarantees, so the securities also. This can then assure that the company really pays. So in general, we have here something like different kinds of guarantees. So for instance, in Chinese they separate between Wubao and Renbao. So this means something like a fixed guarantee, so like cars, for instance, fixed assets, and also like Renbao means in that sense that a company can take the risk and guarantee for you or for the other party that they pay the amount in the game, so the amount concerned in that sense. And so this is about the guarantees. Another topic is that you should actively exercise your so-called unsafe right of defense. So this means in Chinese it's 不安抗辩权. In German it's Unsicherheitseinrede. So this is also a principle, so which states that when the counterparty has a mismanagement or is, for instance, in danger to go bankrupt, then or there's some other possibility of defaulting on the payment, then you as a contract party has the right to term the contract in time and even in advance. So when you know that your party has difficulties, when you can also prove that, then you can stop the contract. And important in this regard is that you also should, of course, control the goods that you might have already delivered, so the goods in transit, and require then the counterparty or the third party to provide guarantees to protect the collection of the money. Let's go on with the second part, so confirmation and preservation of claim certificates. So this topic touches then mainly on the contract management. So we see in our experience as a law firm quite a lot of companies who have actually not signed any contract. Yeah, so this is maybe something that has to do with Chinese legal culture. So this is still happening a lot. And so we, of course, recommend to sign a contract for each business deal you engage in, and to also keep this contract, to have a good contract management, to store your contracts, also not only the digital copies, but also the hard copies. And yeah, we see a lot of companies actually where there's a lot of chaos in their management. So this is what we recommend always, to have a clean and good management of contracts. Another topic is, of course, that you can go into signing a claim certificate. So this is in essence something very quite similar to a contract. So it's a certificate that states that debtor and a creditor exists. I will talk about this later, and about the details, and that a certain amount is owned by one company. And of course you can also then keep emails and recordings that can help you later also to prove that there is a contractual situation. Yes, so as already shortly mentioned, so what is a claim certificate? So a claim certificate is a certificate that proves that a claim exists. So in such a certificate, of course, the full name of the debtor, so also the company name of the debtor and also of the creditor should be written down clearly. Then also, of course, contact persons and also the amount in area should be mentioned clearly, and both in number and in writing, so in words. Then, of course, also write down the time limits of the area, so including the start and the end date of the loan, so very specific dates. Also then specify on the interests of the area, so it should have a clear annual and monthly interest rate, and also a total interest rate at best. Also, it is recommendable to state the payment date and method of the principal. So the principal is the concrete amount in place that is in discussion. So in Chinese it's 本金. So in the example earlier it was, for instance, 1 million RMB, and also then of course the interest, so the liqi. So the Chinese talk of 本金和利息, so the principal and the interest for such a claim certificate. And yeah, last but not least, of course, there should be then the official seal, so the gaizhang of the debtor company, also of the creditor maybe, and also signature. So this is very important. So the job then for the Chinese legal system. Then let's talk about the collection of accounts receivables. So to what should we pay attention to when we collect the accounts receivables? So the most important thing is what is called in Chinese 诉讼时效. 诉讼时效, so the statute of limitations. So this means that the claim of a creditor has a certain time limit actually, which is regulated by Chinese law up to 3 years. So this claim is called then the statute of limitation. So this means after this period of the statute of limitation, the debtor may propose to you that the time for claiming the credit has already passed, so you don't have any right actually anymore to claim that money, and the court also will not support you then to request the money from the debtor. So how can we now avoid the expiration of the statute of limitations? So important is first of all that you claim your debts to the debtor in writing always. So for instance, of course, by email, official documents, or by a lawyer letter. And important in this regard is also that the debtor should receive your claim debts in writing. So it's not enough that you just send something out, but you should also then, you might have to prove that the debtor has really received your document. Another point is that you should require the debtor to change the claim certificate within the statute of limitations. So this is what is called in Chinese 欠条. So to change the credit note, the claim note in that sense. Also, of course, when you institute a lawsuit or apply for arbitration within the statute of limitations, then also you can avoid the expiration of the statute of limitations. And of course, what is always a proof is when the debtor continues to pay the interest. So this by nature already shows that he has acknowledged the existence of the debt, or when you have email communication, so by means of other retainable methods. So what else is important? So a quite important aspect is, of course, to actively collect ARs, so accounts receivables. A lot of companies, maybe they are afraid of actively collecting ARs because they fear that they might destroy the business relationship or lose the customer. But we recommend that you should, in a polite and active way, nevertheless talk about this topic, of course, and not to be afraid of losing the customer in that sense. Because what we see really is the main reason that businesses die in China is of problems with costs with costs in that sense, and this is highly related to the topic of late payments also. So what you could do is, for instance, keep sending emails to remind about the payment, and also when then companies, for instance, state that they have already paid, you could ask then also for the payment proof certificate from the bank, for instance, or just get a screenshot from the online banking system, for instance. So this is what can then help you to have a proof about this. The next step would then be to send a formal dunning letter. So Mahnbrief in German and 催款函 in Chinese. So this means that you remind the client in an official and polite way that you are serious about the overdue payment, and that you would remind him in an official way to please pay the money the customer owes you. Another important aspect is the way how you collect money. So it's always helpful not only to talk to the finance person in the company of the counterparty, but also maybe to the business development team, to contacts in the business development team, or to the HR, for instance. So because these persons can then act as multiplicators in the company of the other party to drive your interests, so to say, regarding the collection of the ARs. The same applies for your own company. So you could also use your sales team, for instance, not only your finance team, to follow up on AR collection. Also, last but not least, a good way is to develop something like an incentive policy. So when colleagues in your team are able to collect, for instance, a large amount of an AR, then they might be rewarded by this in some way. Okay, then we are already going to the last point, so default payment processes. So what can be done when it seems that the money cannot be paid? So also here important is really to actively negotiate with the debtor how to deal now with the overdue payment. So we have seen customers where money has not paid for years over years, and the amount is quite high, has been quite high. So important is to push here in a sense and to be actively involved into the negotiation. Another point is, of course, when the amount is maybe not so high, also the other party is heading to the deadline, so to say, to think about extending the time limit of the debt. So this has a lot, of course, to do with the concrete situation of the other party and what is your relationship with the other party. Also, of course, important is to inform about the consequences of their default. So to explain to them what you and the other party have agreed about in the contract, and what might happen when the other party will not pay. A last resort, of course, is then to institute a lawsuit or to bring an arbitration on the way when it's impossible to communicate. What you can also think about is to accept other methods to pay off the debts when there is no hope for the money. So you can settle by physical settlement or by equity settlement, for instance. Or as already mentioned, you could also engage a third party with good credit to that takes over the risk in that sense, so requires full guarantees to settle the debt. And of course, as already mentioned, it's important that you promptly exercise the existing security rights when you have goods in transition to prevent from property transferring. So what can be done when a company went bankrupt? So here you should definitely notify the carrier in time. So this is the first thing that you should always do, to notify the carrier in time who is transferring your goods, to control the goods, to inform the company about the bankrupt situation of the receiver of the goods, to avoid any losses. And in the case the counterparty has been filed for bankruptcy by other creditors, so when there are multiple creditors, it is also recommendable to participate in the bankruptcy liquidation process of the other party in time, and so that you can file for bankruptcy to engage with other parties in that sense regarding the counterparty. So maybe one important thing is what I call here the escalation pyramid. So this is something like a pyramid that you could follow as a guideline when you deal with debtors. So the first step here should be, the starting point should always be to discuss in friendly communication, in bilateral communication between the debtor and the creditor regarding a solution. So if such a friendly consultation does not work out, you could then think about engaging a lawyer. So this would be already a step that should increase the attention of the debtor. So the lawyer could then issue a lawyer's letter normally, and it would help to drive the debt collection. As a third escalation step, if this does not work, so if a lawyer letter has been sent and the debtor is still not willing to pay, then in some cases at least, especially when you are a representative of a company which is quite renowned in Germany, and also especially when there's a high amount of money involved. So when we're talking about national key players, hidden champions from Germany or elsewhere from Europe, then you could also as a company consider to engage chambers of commerce or industry associations like VDMA, for instance, to let them issue a letter, and even contact maybe Chinese chambers of commerce or industry associations to help with the collection. If this also does not help, then you could escalate to the next step, that you engage the embassy, for instance. Also, this is something that, of course, only will work for you if you are a really more renowned company and when the money concerned is really quite high. So otherwise, the embassies might not work for you in that sense. A last resort, of course, is then to engage collecting companies, and as already mentioned, going to court. Of course, this will then increase the danger that you lose the client, of course, because this includes always that the business relationship will likely break. Maybe one of the last slides, just some additional notes about collecting companies. So it's always a double-edged sword in that sense. So they act, of course, quite quickly and quite efficiently also. So you will get your money on the one side. You have to pay them for the collection, of course. So normally it's about 10 to 30% maybe. Their working methods are quite flexible, but on the other side they use often some Wild West methodology, so like threatening people or maybe other means which are also of course not legal in that sense. So it depends in the end of if you want to use this. Also, of course, what is your company culture, what is your standing in the end regarding this method. Also, of course, behaviors of the collection company, they might be traced back to you in the end. So there's always this danger. Then regarding filing a lawsuit, it is important, so the second point here, that if you need to go to the court where the debtor is located, then you have to you have to pay the lawyers, of course, normally first. So the lawyers who will go with you there they will charge a part of the upfront fees. Also important is that the execution in other places may be more complicated. So normally when you go to the place where the debtor is, then you normally have some local protectionism, so some guanxi maybe in that area, and it might be hard for you to get your rights. So we recommend in general to have friendly consultations and to solve this the conflicts you have with a lawyer. So normally this is also, from our experience, the best way to solve this in a friendly way, and also to keep the business relationship in the future, maybe even. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and I hope I have helped you. If you have any questions, you can always then contact me and ask me. And now I think we have some upcoming questions also. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, René, for the very detailed and comprehensive presentation. We do have indeed some questions that we have collected, and I'm just going to raise them. So, first of all, you talk about business reputation platforms, right? You have mentioned a couple. What are the pros and cons of these platforms, and which ones would you recommend? Like, for instance, for companies in Beijing.
Yeah. I mean, we would not recommend any specific ones for this purpose. But I mean, it's important to definitely to check. So, for instance, I mean, most of them, they are really like government based, so they have some background, and like especially, for instance, Beijing 企业查询. So each city actually has such a platform for local companies, and then you can look up some general information. So who is, for instance, the registered legal representative? What is the amount of registered capital? What is the time of the business license, for instance? So all these points you can look up there, and then you can have a first impression about what is the status quo of the company in that sense. And if you want to go deeper, then you can also then go with a commercial company. So they will then investigate more deeper into the structure also.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, when looking at accounts receivable financing, AR, we see that recent pieces of legislation like the SME promotion law provide for the usage of accounts receivable in financing. What impact do you expect that this will have on foreign SME financing, if any?
Yeah. So what we have just actually only these days, what we have found out that there is one circular from the People's Bank of China and other Chinese agencies touching on this topic. So there's a so-called work plan for the special action on accounts receivable financing for small and micro enterprises. So at the moment we are still, because we just received this information, so we are just researching into this topic, and so this anyhow shows that China has really realized this problem, that ARs can be a business threat for companies, a business risk, and that they have to fight against this risk also from government side. So our experience is that, as already mentioned, that the cost problem is the biggest reason that companies die in the end. So because other companies, so their business partners, they don't pay them, and that companies should pay attention to this also.
Okay, great. Thanks. Now the next question would be, you have discussed legal procedures for addressing late payments. You have mentioned that of course the debtors can return in the best case scenario, the money owed. And in some cases, interest can be demanded.
Yes.
Are there any other penalties stipulated under Chinese law for late payments, aside from giving back the money or interest?
Yeah, actually not. So there's not much in Chinese law about this. So as already mentioned, the main source is really this interpretation. So where the height of the interests are recommended. So, and of course, I mean, you can of course then go to court. So this is what the law regulates, but there's nothing more specific about this.
Right. Now, on a more practical side, again, you mentioned the late payment interest charges. You said that in the claim certificate, this should be included clearly, right?
Yeah.
But how to address this during the negotiations? Because I imagine that for most of our SMEs, the main goal is first to receive the payment owed. So what would you recommend? How would you recommend going through this process? Would you recommend mentioning the interest charges from the very beginning and throughout the whole process, or leaving it at a later stage?
I mean, I would recommend that companies should definitely talk about this from the beginning, so not just during the business deal. So this is not a good recommendation. So it should be clear from the beginning what should happen when someone is not paying or when someone is paying late. And of course, for that it is important first to understand the other party. So who is the other party? Do they have, for instance, high liquidity? Yeah, or do they have are they a state-owned company, for instance? And what does this mean? Also important is, of course, the respective industry. How to say? So the specific industry rules, so to say. So when there are, for instance, in one specific industry, when there's a rule that says that a normal interest rate is 30% and not 15%, so then you should of course stick to this industry rule in that sense. And so this is what we would recommend, to really look into the company, into the industry from the beginning, and to fix that amount from the beginning. And of course you should openly discuss this with the other party, so there's nothing that you should fear from that. Yeah, it's a normal discussion point. You should treat this as a normal aspect in your negotiation and openly discuss about it, what should happen when the other side does not pay.
Right. And what about debt collection costs? Because this happen 99% of the times. Can companies expect the debtor to cover those costs, those debt collection costs, or?
This is something that in the end is hard to answer, because each case is different. So I would rather say that for this, I mean, you should of course, as you are the company which gets not paid, should include this cost at best into the amount the debtor has to pay you. But this is something, I mean, this is of course something you have to negotiate with the other party. And because also when you think about, as mentioned, it's not a small amount sometimes. Yeah? So it goes up to until 30% maybe. Starts with regularly 10% of the amount concerned. So this might be then also result in a high amount in the end. Yeah.
Right. So on to the next question. Some companies, buyers may claim that they cannot make the payment in goods due to reasons such as they encounter some difficulty when processing the payment with their banks, or the banks asking for additional documents to prove the authenticity of the deal, which were not required in previous transactions. Is this a likely thing to happen, and how should the foreign seller deal with this situation?
Yeah, I see. Yes, I mean it could be true. It could be true. Yes, so this might happen that the bank says, "I need some certificates from you," and maybe the Chinese company did not know about this, so this hinders the payment in that sense. But on the other side, of course, this is not an issue of the for you. Yeah, so this is a problem for the debtor. So what we recommend here is that this should be not part of what is in Chinese called 不可抗力. So the topic of the term of force majeure. So you should recommend. We recommend that you write also in your contract, for instance, that such topics of bank payments and of concrete requirements from the bank are not, when there are problems, these are not treated as force majeure in that sense. So that the debtor is of course then responsible for this, for providing the bank with needed payments. Yeah. Also, maybe another topic is you can also then, of course, actively engage into this discussion with the bank and help, as a practical advice, to help the other partners with the bank together to find a solution for that. So this is the second aspect, and by doing so, then when you go, for instance, go with the contracting partner, with your counterparty to the bank, then you might even find out that this, what he says, is maybe not true. Yeah, so the money can be transferred actually, and then this shows that the counterparty is maybe lying to you. Yeah, so they just don't want to pay. So this is also a practical recommendation that you could follow then.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
So, last question. Now, late payments is an issue that has been widely discussed in policy dialogues between the EU and China. The EU SME Center has participated every year in the EU-China SME policy dialogue, and the issue of late payments has been raised again and again, with some exchanges from both sides and from the European side, especially on the late payments directive. Can we expect from the Chinese side any more concrete piece of legislation or regulation related to late payments, such as a version, for instance, of the European late payment directive in the future?
Yeah. At the moment, we have not yet found anything into this direction. I mean, maybe there's something in discussion in small circle committees, so like expert committees. So this might be the case, but for that we are not involved. So this is then normally a high-level legal body that discusses such first drafts, but we are not aware of anything like that at the moment.
Great. Well, that's all in terms of questions. Thank you very much again, Rene.
Yes, you're welcome.
For those of you interested, you can find Rene's contact here, as well as the QR code for Ecovis Beijing. And you can also follow the USME Center here. So, thank you, Rene.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation also.
And we hope that viewers will enjoy and find this webinar as useful as I personally have found it.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.